Hi lovelies, and welcome in my little corner of the world. Today I thought it would be fun to take a little mindful walk through the countryside together to gather a bunch of herbs, plants and flowers that we'll need for upcoming magical recipes and spells, as well as to learn how to safely and respectfully harvest wild herbs out in nature, just like a seasoned green witch. Nature is offering us an abundance of invaluable gifts if we just open our eyes to see them. They're just out there waiting to be picked up by us. We truly have an entire veggie banket and apothecary at our fingertips, and it's completely free. And you really don't need your own garden to harvest magical herbs and plants almost all year round. But there are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind before wild foraging. And now we'll have a look at the most important rules when it comes to collecting wild plants. Be sure you know what you harvest. It is so important to be sure of what you're picking out in the wild, because many lovely and healthy plants have very toxic false friends that will cause harm to your body when touched or digested. So it is absolutely mandatory to get a thorough plant guide. And there is really no standard book I could recommend here, because you have to get one for your specific area and location. We have different plants and herbs all over the world, so make sure you get a complete and descriptive herbal guide for your part of the globe. If it has detailed description of the plants along with pictures of the blossoms, leaves, fruits and stem, that is a great find. If you aren't that much into carrying a book around, you could alternatively use an app. I like iNaturalist, Flora Incognita if you're German speaking, and Picture This, which are all great for some basic plant and herb identification. Always read the entire plant description. The difference between a natural cough remedy and a 24-hour puke fest can lie in something little as the form of the plant stem. Another way to get to know your local herbs and plants is to take a guided hike with a herbal expert. In Germany, these tours are called Kräuterwanderungen and will be available in most cities and towns. You could ask in your local adult education center, city hall, or check online if you find something similar for your country. The right equipment. You'll need to bring the right equipment with you to collect your treasures. If you're harvesting from a tree or bigger plant, secateurs are a great tool to get your twigs without harming the plant. Another good tool to carry is a sharp knife and gardening scissors. If you're looking for roots or you want to dig up an entire plant, don't forget to bring a little spade. I would also advise to invest in a pair of good gardening gloves, especially if you have your eyes set on a plant that comes with its own protective little thorns. Furthermore, you will need a container for your plants. I always recommend an open container like a wicker basket or a simple cardboard box. A lot of herbs and plants won't do well in a plastic bag or closed container and will wilt quickly. A proper outfit. And while we are at that topic of correct equipment, please also remember to wear the right clothes. I know Instagram and YouTube are definitely no help, because they make us picture ourselves roaming the forest barefoot in a long white flowy dress, wicker basket in hand, or a cute pair of shorts and a floppy straw hat on our head. Or maybe that's only me. Well, anyways, that is not practical attire for wild foraging. You have to keep in mind that some of our most wanted plants are growing in the midst of a sea of stinging nettles or chest-high grass fields, with tons of bugs in them. You might find your desired herb growing just on the other side of a really muddy ditch. So I would always advise long-sleeve clothing and closed boots or even wellies. Please also have your local fauna in mind when going out and about. Where I live, the risk for getting ticks that carry TBE pathogens are extremely high. So long clothes are definitely required. If you have poisonous animals in your area, also choose your clothing to be safe from any harm from them. Get to know your area. If you have a specific plant in mind, you will first want to learn where to look for them and where to find them in your specific area. All plants have different preferences when it comes to the soil and conditions they grow in. Some plants are found in moist and fertile grounds, close to river banks. Others prefer a sandy, chalky or dry ground. Some will only grow under the leafy roofs of a forest, and others again only grow in needle forests. With that in mind, you want to get to know your area better. It actually is a great excuse to get your bike or hiking shoes out and really discover your area with open eyes. Learning where to find what And even if it's out of season at the moment, you will know where to look for a certain plant in the next year. I always recommend bringing your green journal with you when on a walk and jot down the location where you found an interesting plant so you don't forget. If you're still very new to the green path, I also recommend to go at least for a bi-weekly hike and keep your eyes open. Note when what plant starts to bloom and when they're out of bloom again, when they start to carry berries and so forth. You can write this in your Green Witch grimoire and have the information there for the years to come, getting you more and more in tune with nature around you. Please also know the history of your place and its impact on the environment. Where I live, for example, it is still not advised to collect wild mushrooms because the radiation levels are still too high, even 35 years after the Chernobyl catastrophe. Location, location, location. Location is also important for knowing what not to pick. Plants that grow in private property are off limits. After all, someone else has been caring for these babies and is looking forward to harvest them, so don't be a thief. Plants that are growing next to streets are off limits too, as they absorb all the toxins from car exhaust. If you get the chance to get out in the countryside, a little forest or park, to harvest, that is always better than the city. If you're only planning to use those plants for offerings, spell jars or decorative purposes, you can of course also wild forage in the city. But please do not consume them. As a rule of thumb, the next street should be at least 30 meters away. You also want to make sure that, if avoidable, you don't pick things from too close to the ground or very close to a path. The reason for that is that someone might have walked their four-pawed friends there and they might have gone toilet on them. This carries also a small risk to get worm diseases. This risk, however, is very small if you wash your plants extremely well. Another spot you will want to avoid is very close to a field, as you don't know what the farmers use to protect their crop, and ideally you don't want to have those pesticides on your lovely healthy plants. When to harvest. You will also want to learn when to harvest a certain herb, plant or flower. This will be determined by its specific dates for bloom in your climate zone, which you can look up online. It will also be determined by the weather, times of the day and state of growth. This really differs from plant to plant, but as a rule of thumb, most blossoms should be harvested in the morning after the morning dew has gone and the sun starts to shine, ideally on a sunny day. All of this has impact on the taste and the vitamin levels of the plants you are picking. For some plants, it is advised that the weather beforehand should have been dry for a couple of days. Other plants again do better when harvested in a certain moon cycle. And others can only be safely harvested before they bloom, because otherwise their toxins level are too high. Also keep in mind that different parts of the same plant usually have different harvest times in the years. This is something you will need to research before going out and foraging. Only pick what you need. When finding a particularly good batch of the herbs you are after, it is very easy to get carried away and pick too much. But I urge you not to do that. First of all, it is wasteful if you in the end not even use all of it, but it is also important for nature to respect a couple of guidelines. You should always only harvest as much as the plant can withstand and recover from. That will also mean that you have to learn how to harvest correctly without harming the remaining plant. When digging up entire plants with a root and taking them, make sure there are plenty of the same around. Never pick protected plants and make sure you know which ones are endangered in your area. Please also think of the wildlife that might be living off the berries or seeds of the plant. Always leave enough for them and only pick what you need for your personal use. If you want to use herbs and plants commercially, you should plant them yourself on your property. In many areas, you will also have guidelines on how much you are actually allowed to pick out in the wild. Where I live, the Handstraußregelung is the common measure. It translates to handheld bouquet rule, meaning that you are only allowed to pick as much as you can carry in one hand. Please research what rules applies where you live. It is always a good idea to go out with a plan on what plant you will need and not get the foraging fever and go crazy while you're out and about. Speaking from experience here. Learn spells and recipes. Once you have all the basics down, you probably want to use all these new treasures in your cooking or your magic. You can either go the route of finding a plant, learning about its medicinal, culinary and magical properties, and then researching fitting spells or recipes from there, which is a great little exercise at broadening your horizon and skill set. But you can also search out recipes that sound yummy or spells that would be interesting for you and then collect the plants accordingly. On my channel, I will always share my favorite recipes and spells with you, so if you want to follow along, click that subscribe button right now so you don't miss any adventures. In fact, we are making delicious and magical nettle ravioli soon. Thank nature. If you're a green witch, an animist connected to the fae or spiritual nature lover in general, you will want to thank Mother Nature when taking something from her. This can be done in various forms. Maybe if you have just harvested from a bush, like the elder tree, that is closely linked to the fairy realm, you might want to leave some fae offerings in form of nuts or berries. If it's a particularly dry summer, you can also bring along a little water and water the remaining plant. In folkloric beliefs, there are some signs of respect that one has to show before taking from a certain plant. Just go with what feels right for you and for your path, and please always remember to only leave things as offerings that won't harm the wildlife, but actually give back to Mother Nature. So those were my tips on foraging like a green witch. Do you have any thoughts, tips or tricks to share with us? Then please leave them in the description box below. Thank you for coming along with me on this little hike, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, where we will prepare a wonderful midsummer or Litha celebration together. And I will be sharing my magical recipe for sun-infused elder water with you. I wish you a wonderful week. See you soon!